I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction to a wood lathe. This is the wood lathe that we have in the green workshop. It has some standardised parts which are on all lathes, or all wood lathes. We've got a chuck, we've got a tool rest, we've got a spinning centre, or we can alternatively change this over and put a drill in there, and then we can drill parts. We've got a speed control, on and off buttons, extraction, and then lighting if we need any additional light. In terms of different things that we can use on this machine, there's some safety that's involved. You'll see that I'm wearing a smock at the minute. Using a wood lathe is a lot of fun, but it tends to make dust and swarf fly everywhere, so it's important you protect yourself. So to help prevent getting your clothes filthy and getting dust everywhere, you wear a smock, and then you wear some sort of face guards. Now depending how much of this you're doing, if you're only doing a small amount, then just a face guard like this to protect your eyes is fine, or some goggles. If you're doing lots, then you'll need some sort of ventilator, so you'll be wearing an entire enclosed mask which filters air so that you're not breathing in lots of dust, which then can cause respiratory problems. In terms of the kind of things we can use, these are called blanks. So you can make your own blanks, you can have them all shapes and sizes. You're only limited by the distance between the middle of the chuck and the bed of the lathe. But on this particular chuck, or this particular lathe, sorry, you can actually unbolt this, twist it sideways, and then we could turn something, if you're really brave, from the floor all the way up. But most of the time for us, this is easy enough distance, because remember, this is just the radius, so actually your diameter is double this distance. You tend to buy blanks, especially what we call bowl blanks, like this. They're a piece of the tree that's cut out. They do not involve the heart of the tree, so the centre of the tree. They're cut out of other sections of the tree. And we've got a couple of examples there. You can have longer blanks like this, and again, in terms of the length on this machine, we're only limited by the size of the bed and how far back we can move our running centre. But you can actually get extensions for these, and in an industrial level, you'd have a huge version of this if you wanted to turn anything really big, right the way up to pretty much an entire tree. So we have smaller blanks and square blanks like this. When you look at it, you can see that the maximum diameter you would be able to get out of this, because being a lathe, we're going to turn something to make it round, or a cylinder, is fairly limited. So here you've got about 50 millimeters maximum. In reality, that's probably 40 millimeters. You can see this is a rough bowl that's out, or been shaped. In terms of attaching a piece to the lathe, as I said, you've got a chuck, in which case you've got a chuck key, and you can open and shut the jaws of your chuck. And then there's a few different options of what you can do. You can have a mounting thread like this. You would drill a hole in your piece. So if I was going to use this to mount one of these, I would drill a hole in the centre. For this particular one, that would be 8 millimeters. You then turn that into your work, and because of the direction the machine will spin, as you apply any friction with any of the tools, that'll actually increase the resistance as opposed to undoing it. So you can see that's now mounted. Normally you would have that mounted flush against a piece of wood, but for this example someone's shaped that bowl. This can then be put inside the chuck. The chuck key tightened, and then that would be attached. Alternatively, we take that out. We've got a mounting ring here. You can see there's lots of countersunk holes. That can then be mounted, which will give you a really strong fixing. Tends to be for much bigger material than perhaps this. This would be fine for this one, but if I had a big or much heavier piece, I could mount this with screws. That will then sit. I'll close up the chuck. Like so. You've got to imagine that the piece is now mounted, and then I'm opening the chuck out until that's held, and again the lathe can then spin. In terms of tools, there's a huge array of different tools which we can use to shape the material. This is called a roughing gouge. This would be used to take away most of the material, say to turn something like this down to being round. I can actually help myself a bit by using a saw or a plane to remove most of the material that you're obviously going to have to remove to get that to be round. But I could quite happily use a roughing gouge to take away that. I can then use a tool like this, which has a really sharp edge, which I'll run along the piece to give me a nice smooth finish. That tends to be more at the finishing stages. I can put details in. So here you can see a sharp edge, which I could press into the material. What I'll do is I'll get a piece set up, and then I'll give you a demonstration down here. Okay, so what you'll see is I've mounted a blank onto the lathe. I've clamped this particular one just into the jaws. I've marked out the middle of the piece of wood and then got the running centre so that as this spins, this is going to hold this end. It's really important to have work supported well. You'll also see that I've put my extraction right next to my blank so that hopefully this will try and take as much as possible. But it's a wood lathe, so generally speaking, dust goes pretty much everywhere. It's important to keep an eye on this to make sure that it doesn't loosen as we go through, so you'll see me doing that periodically. In terms of the tool rest, it's got a few different kinds of adjustment. What I want to be looking to do is trying to get this lined up so it's about halfway of the height. It's not going to be hit by either the wood or the chuck, but it's as close as I can get it without that happening. So I can see there my tool rest is pretty good, but I'm not going to be hitting. This is really important because we want to make sure that we're never able to hit anything metal with anything metal. When we turn the machine on, you need to make sure you're stood back and to one side so that if this comes off, it's either going to travel in this direction or this direction. So we can turn it on. And we can see there, it's still firmly held. Potentially I could tighten that just a little bit to make sure that the chuck can't go anywhere. Or the blank can't go anywhere. Try that again. So now that I'm happy that my wood is well secured, I can start working on it. Now I could have removed some of this material first, which would just reduce the amount of effort I've got to do. But I'm going to use a roughing gouge. And really the edge that cuts on a roughing gouge is this edge here. So I'm going to let the work come and hit on the underneath. I'm then going to turn and have it cut like so. And you can see as that goes round, I'm just removing small amounts of material. Now, as I said, this is going to be a rough cut, so I'm not expecting this to become beautiful and smooth straight away. I can always work on that. I'm just trying to get this to become circular. I'll turn the extraction on, put my face guard on, and then I'll start to remove some of this material. can see here I've started to take away a lot of the material. Just need to tighten up the chuck again a little bit, just loosening slightly as the material moves around. But I've really started to get round, and I've only got a small amount left to remove, so I'll just remove that, and I'll only do this central section. Now if you're wondering what kind of thing might be made like this, lots of templates, moulds and bowls, but if you've got banisters, have a flat section at either end or a square section at either end and a curved section in the middle. This is a similar way, although it might be done on an industrial level where instead of somebody holding a tool, it would be done by machine. A similar type way in which it, at least traditionally, would be done. So you can see now I've got this down to being fully round. I could then do some finishing. So I could do some finishing passes. Now normally I would either be doing an entire length or looking to finish here, but for this demonstration I'm just going to make this round. For this tool I'd be running it along in a direction like this, and that would do a much finer cut. If I just show you perhaps a bit of detailing. And you can see how you could quite happily put different detailing into your piece. Now the other thing you might be wondering is, well, the extraction hasn't done a huge amount, but really I'm not interested in the extraction taking away the bigger chunks. I'm interested in it taking away all the fine dust that I might breathe in, and for that job it's doing fairly well. It always involves a lot of cleanup there. And that is a wood lathe. One thing I didn't mention earlier is that if you need an emergency stop, there's one just under my foot which I can stamp on, and that will stop the machine and need resetting. And of course there's the emergency stops around the room as well.
Okay, so we're now on the computer in the blue workshop. Now, one of the most common ways to get your file up here is to share it with a teacher and then have it on a folder in Drive. Your teacher will have needed to log into this computer because this is a teacher-only computer. You then find your file and you download it. And then once it's downloaded, you're going to open it in 2D Design. So it should be exactly the same file as you previously had. And now all we're going to do is we're going to look to print this. Now you need to pick your material. So I know that I'm only going to be using a small corner here. I've got the rough sizes, so I can use a bit that's got some elements cut out. But if you needed the whole sheet, then of course you need to use a new sheet. You're then going to go File, Print, and from here you're going to select VLS 6.60 and then click OK. From the bottom of the screen here, you're going to select the little red square. There's a green one that looks very similar, but you're going to select the red square, and that should bring up a view of your part or multiple parts on the program. From here it's fairly simple. You're going to go into Settings, and there's a bunch of different materials that you can pre-select. General hardwoods is what we pick for laser ply, and then just in the folder or the box over here, it asks you for a thickness. The thickness of this material is 3 millimeters. So I select 3, I select general hardwoods, then I select apply, OK. I'm just going to quickly click back onto settings and make sure it's saved those. If it didn't, make sure you put 3 in there, then click back on and then click apply. From here, you're now ready to go. So I'm going to take you through the next stages, but this is going to be without a voiceover because it will be quite loud. We're going to turn the machine on here using that button, and then we turn the extraction on using this button here. You can open the laser cutter and it references the top left. So I'm going to put my plywood in and slide it up to make sure it's in the top left. Shut the machine down. Turn on the laser. Turn on the extraction. Once you turn the machine off and you've made sure that it's homed back into the top right, you can open up, and then providing the machine's working correctly and you selected the correct material, you should get whatever you've drawn.